this is Caesar, your host with Inspire Movement. So we're glad that you could join us. Today we continue with our series on music and the arts. And we find ourselves in this beautiful location, Timucua Arts Foundation, with none other than Mr. Benoit Glazer, which is the founder as well as the artistic director of this beautiful nonprofit organization. And I'm going to transition very quickly as we get to know him to Mr. Benoit Glazer. How are you, sir?
Hi, very good. Thank you, Caesar. Welcome to Timokoa. So what do you want to know?
So we don't, I'm getting to know you, having been here before, not too long ago for our visit with Dr. Sam Desmet. But for our audience, our viewing audience, and for those folks in Central Florida which haven't had the good fortune to get to know you and your family and what you're doing with this nonprofit organization, can you share with us a little bit of your personal background, just anything generally that you would like to share?
Sure, absolutely. I was born about an hour north of Montreal in the woods of the Laurentian Mountains. And I grew up wanting to be a physicist. So, I took all the science classes and at school. And I was introduced to music very early on by my father. So my mom and dad used to dance in a folkloric dance troupe. And my father was a fiddler and played guitar and sang, and he had lots of friends. But so you had friends over to jam, every week, twice a week. And so I'm skipping the sports part because I don't need to go there. But my dad and I were sports enthusiasts, like cross country skiing, and he played hockey a lot. I didn't do a lot of team sports. I did more like cross-country running and cross-country skiing. That kind of thing. So anyhow, for years I just watched. I should also mention that we built our own house up there, in I guess 1972 we started, and so that's where I learned a lot of the craft that I would apply eventually to this place here. But I was 8 years old at the time when we first started building. But my dad passed away before the house was finished, so I finished the house on my own, but I was 15 by then. So, of course, building your own home can be a decades long. If I showed you all of the details, there's window frames that have not been treated, oiled yet, that kind of things here. And we've been here 13 years, so, So anyhow, I always sat in the staircase, watching my father play music with his friends. And when I was 12 years old, I just said something. I said, hey, you guys could use a drummer maybe, And so he almost literally grabbed me by the ear and brought me to a jazz guitarist in town. So that the small town, the closest town was about, 8 miles, not far, 8 miles away, but still. But there was a jazz guitarist there who lived there, and so he brought me there. And over the summer, I had 3 or 4 lessons a week on music theory because my dad didn't read music, so he wanted me to learn to read music. And so, unbeknownst to me, this education would turn out to be incredible for me because I still haven't learned anything since then as far as music theory. And 6 years of college, and I didn't learn anything new that I didn't learn from that man. So, So at the end of the summer, my dad, the T-shirt on my dad, okay, your son's ready, he can. So he said, he can read music. Oh, he can write. He can read. He can write. He can arrange. He's ready to go. And so, so he turned to me and says, okay, what instrument do you want to play? I said, drums. So, of course, I think it's ironic because a lot of drummers don't need a lot of advanced theory. But anyways, so I played drums. And then when I got to high school, I wanted to play in the big band, which is an after-school activity, because all my classes were science classes. And it turns out that
I'm sorry. Were you on a hard sciences track in high school?
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. My idol was Stephen Hawking, and I read a lot of physics books and things like that, and that's what was interesting to me. Anyways, but along the way, I graduated high school early, like young. So when my father died, it was basically like a week before the deadline to apply to college, and I changed my mind. I said, okay, I'm going to go into music. But in the meantime, so there was already a great drummer playing in the big band, and so I said, well, what do you need? I'd love to play in the big band because it was the one thing that was after school. And I said, well, I need a first tenor who can play clarinet. I said, okay. So I started playing tenor and clarinet, and that's what I did until that day when I registered for music. I sent it to 3 colleges, and then, of course, they send you the letter back. Okay, so what instrument to set up auditions and all that thing. And I said, oh, I don't know if I want to play clarinet. Like that was like a utility choice. Like I didn't love the clarinet, necessarily. I didn't necessarily see myself spending the rest of my life playing clarinet. So I tried every instrument in the band room, and the one instrument I could not make a sound out of was the trumpet. So I picked the trumpet, and this is what I did. I had 6 weeks to prepare for the audition, and I did. So and then 6 years later, after 6 years of college, I was teaching at McGill University already. So it was a really, everybody has their own path, like in life, and whether it's in music or not. And mine was just a little bit kind of strange and unusual.
So the follow-up question that I had to that, I think maybe is a little gray in your situation because of all of the different experiences that you had. But it seems to me that when it comes to that underlying passion for music, would you say that it would be, I guess, during those high school years, possibly?
No, I mean...
In terms of, like, this is my trajectory for the rest of my life. I'm
Yeah.
going to go all in, and now your aspirations to be a physicist sort of
Yeah, well,
maybe...
I don't compartmentalize like that. Like I don't
Right.
think of life like that. I think of life as one thing, and the universe is one. I try anyways. Every beautiful sound I make with my trumpet goes out in the universe and changes the universe forever. Right? That's what I believe. And so, it's a physics thing. You could say it's a metaphysics thing. It's my way of thinking. So. I wasn't necessarily passionate about music. I just, at that time in my life when I made that choice, it just so happened like, my father just died of a massive heart attack. He was 37 years old. So I said, I don't want to sit on my butt, doing nothing. So I need to expend some energy, And so music was right there, and I chose that. And it could have been something, I could have gone into sports full on, It doesn't, to me, it would have been the same thing. And I would have ended up maybe not at the same place, but the same person. It's the same thing to me. So I wouldn't say my passion for music, I knew fairly early on, I started conducting seriously, at 18 years old. I was touring with throughout North America, conducting at 18 years old. And so, that was, but that's like a kind of a leadership position, this kind of collaboration where you're trying to unify a group of people into, towards a common goal, that kind of thing. And to me, that was very appealing. And so all of my gen ed classes or electives at college, they were all management classes because I wanted to be a conductor. That's what, was pretty obvious to me. I had a talent for it, and, I ended up, in positions that, very few people get to do at such an early age. And so that's what I worked towards, and that's what I did. And that's, took the audition at McGill for the big band position because I was playing my last 3 years of college. I was playing 40 hours a week of big band on top of schooling and everything. And I did other things. I did brass quintet. I did all these other classical ensembles. I did orchestra, but I was pretty deep into big band, and so it just happened. I got a good job, teaching big band because it's just conducting. It's like
Right.
teaching an ensemble at university. It's the same as conducting. When you're that's why they say maestro for conductors, because maestro means teacher. It means master, but the master of the classroom. In older times, it would have been a master and an apprentice, right? So it's a teacher. That's what it means. And so So the two being the same. And my mom was a teacher her entire life, and so teaching was kind of, my father was a born teacher, even though he had a fourth grade education, but he was a very, very smart man, and he had this way of teaching.
Was he self-taught
Yeah.
in his
Yeah,
vocation?
well, he went to vocational, like he was an electrician, so he
Okay.
went to vocational school, but he did things like, he worked at a big regional hospital, like in the town nearby, and he fixed, because it was a regional hospital, like, if a machine, sometimes he was on call, like, a lot of the time,
Mhm.
and he would get a call, okay, they're in surgery, the machine's broken, like, you need to come, it's an emergency, and he would go and fix like electronics things, which was not his field, like, because he was available and he was smart, and he figured these things out, and so I learned a lot from my dad about everything I do now, like he's definitely like, he doesn't have a patent, but he invented a lot of things like tools and things like that, like a multi-position, like a fully adjustable canoe seat, for example, like for a company in Montreal. So that kind of thing, like he invented all these things. He never took patents, but he could have, and he was also one of very few people who coached Olympians in both the Summer Olympics and the Winter Olympics. So he started Pierre Harvey, who is now like the coach of the national team of cross country, the Canadian team of cross country, for the Olympic team. But when he started, my dad was coaching him cross country skiing, because my dad basically like popularized the sport in Quebec, like in the late 60s, early 70s, and then he was also a sharpshooter and an archer, and he ended up coaching the couple. They were both police officers. They lived in our basement before we moved to the country, to the forest, and they constituted the Canadian Olympic archery team, and my dad was their coach, and so
he also had very varying interests.
Yeah,
very broad.
Yeah,
interests.
and my mom, at 52, I think, she quit teaching and she went to law school, and she got a law degree, and she got a master's in law, and so like it runs in the family, like this.
Right.
We would like, not polyglot but polymath, like a attitude towards life, and that served me very well. And in music, I had the same view and the same, so I was a jack of all trades and a master of none, but I was, versatility was my specialty, and so I play all kinds of music. I played many instruments. I learned to play bass, eventually. So for jingles and things like that, when they're not sure what they want, they would ask me, because if I brought everything, I could play the whole jingle by myself,
Mm-hmm.
and so, which I did a few times. So it served me well. That philosophy served me well over the years.
Clearly. Yes. As we dive in, our audience will know why I say that so loosely.
Well, in conducting, of course, is what brought me to Orlando in the first place, 1998. So I taught at McGill for 10 years, and then I had 2 years. I left McGill, and for 2 years I was just freelancing. And then I got, actually, right after I quit McGill, or I left McGill, I should say, I got a call from Cirque du Soleil, and they wanted me to do the O show in Vegas. And I hate Vegas with a passion, so I said, no, thanks. And I hung up the phone. But 2 months later, I read in the paper they were opening a show in Orlando, and I said, oh. So I called the same person. He says, what a coincidence. We're talking about the musical director. Like, right now, I'm going to a meeting for that. And I got the job. I never auditioned for it or anything. The composer knew my work. I was fortunate enough to play in, I did a lot of television work. I conducted award shows and things, but I played trumpet for a cop show, a mafia cop show, and it was the highest rated show, like TV show in history to this day. Like, records have not been broken. So every Monday night, like 85% of the people watch that show every week. Like, you cannot compare, like the Super Bowl doesn't have those kinds of ratings. Like it's like, and it was insane. And so because of that, like, you know, for a while, that specific sound with, I have the harmon mute, a specific harmon mute with, like, it was a specific sound I got, and everybody wanted that sound. So I was doing like every car commercial, like everybody wanted that sound, you know. So it served me well. I was very lucky. And but the composer knew of the show here, knew that work. He said, "Oh, I want that sound, like that's, I love that," you know. And so that's how I got the job here. And then I came here, and very early on, we figured out, back then, it's changed now, of course, but back then it was very hard to find good live music on weeknights, because my nights off were Tuesday and Wednesday at the beginning of the run. And so we said, well, we'll just have our own concert. So we had a concert at our house, and then you know, just 20 people came, and after the concert, people asked, okay, so when's the next one? And I said, I don't know. Don't look at me. I said, okay, you want another one? Okay, let's do another one. But you know, we did the first ones ourselves, like the band at Cirque, you know. But you know, the next one, it was someone else. Like I asked people, and then it was a monthly thing for the first few months, but then it was like twice a month, and every week it was like, it just snowballed. Obviously, there was a need for musicians to have a place. Like Orlando is a unique city, because for musicians, like right now, it's a very bad situation for musicians, but in normal times, like it's a small town with a lot of steady work for musicians, but that steady work is very regimented, very strict. Like,
And when you say steady work, is it
at the parks,
okay?
it's
I was going to
all.
mention like the Philharmonics or
No, that's not steady work. That's a per service orchestra. So yeah, I
Okay.
wouldn't call that steady work. Like
Okay.
when they grow and they hire like contract, you know, full-time contract, but that's not what this is, a per service orchestra. So
Per
it's
service.
like I play for them. No, the steady work is at the parks, is at you know, hotel lobbies for cocktail pianists, you know, that kind of thing. There's a lot of that work, but it's all very rigid. Like they tell you when to play, what to play, with whom you're gonna play, how you're gonna dress, how, you know, how often you're supposed to smile. Like, I mean, it's, you know, I'm exaggerating, but not really. Like
Yeah.
it's very, it's a job. Like, you know, it's the music can be nice, but it's always the same music, like at the parks every day, you know. So it's a job, and so it attracts good musicians, because steady work is hard to come by. Like, you know,
Of course.
in New York City, there's some steady work. You know, maybe Chicago, Los Angeles, you know, in the studios and things. But aside from that, in the United States, like, just to give you an idea, in Montreal, there are always like 6, 7, 8 talk shows with a live band. In the whole of the United States, that's what you have. Like, you know, there's not like, you know, the Late Show, whatever. Like, there's a few shows with a live band, but not that many.
Right.
And so we have that, and that's steady work for musicians. Like, you know, Montreal is also a small city, you know, 1/10 the size of New York City, but there are more people in the Union Book in Montreal than there are in New York City, because per capita there's more music happening than basically anywhere else, you know, which is kind of informed, or it informs people as to why we started our own concert. Because like in Montreal, like like you walk, you hear live music, then 2 doors down you hear live music again. Like it's everywhere, and
It's part of the cultural fabric.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And from like blues, like, you know, whatever style it is, like, it doesn't matter. Like, the Montreal Symphony Orchestra is one of the top orchestras in the world, and like, and there's more. Like, there's the Metropolitan Orchestra, and then there's like on the South Shore, on the North Shore, like there's 4 full-time orchestras in Montreal. Like, for a small city that size, it's impressive, you know. And so the availability of live music and art and theater, because, you know, we've always had to fight for our language, and so theater is big. Television, that's why television is big. Our jingle scene was big, because you have to have special jingles because they have to be in French, and so even if it's Coca-Cola, they have to hire a local, you know, crew
Artists.
to make these commercials, because otherwise you have their own language, and if you try to have an English speaking person do this, it's just, no matter how good they think their French is, you can tell, you know, especially Quebecois French is like a very
Unique.
specific color, and so yeah. But that's why we started this, and then 2004 we had, or maybe 2003, 2004 we had our first Brazilian night. Like we started doing theme things, like we had saxophone night, and so like we tried, like it was already starting, like this kind of like trying to get people to collaborate and create new music and all that kind of stuff. And Brazilians, of course, in the Orlando area, it's a tight knit community, and
it's ever growing.
and it's active.
It's ever growing. Yeah.
It's growing and it's active, and that
Yes.
was back in 2003. It was not as big as it is now.
Yeah.
But they came, and this was a normal suburban home that was not really meant to have 100 people in the home, And so my wife and I, we said, listen, we need to do something, because we can't. That cannot happen so many times. Our neighbors are going to go nuts. Like there were cars parked like for the entire neighborhood along the street. Like it wasn't really suited for that kind of thing. And so we said.
And when you first started, it was part of like a community, so it was like homeowners association.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Hunters Creek, the homeowner association is like very strict, and like it's like yes. And so I'm gonna stop there. So. People didn't have issues with us having concerts at the home, but we didn't want that to start. Like we didn't want to have problems. Yeah. And so we said, well, either we pull back or we go all in. That means like, we'll put our life savings and find a place and build a house that's more suitable for these things. And that's what we did. Mm-hmm. And that's what you see here. So the result, the design here was my third. I had three main designs, one for a long narrow lot, one for a countryside, kind of like a huge lot, and one for a small square lot. And this is the design for the small square lot. It was my favorite design, but that's what we ended up with. The location is ideal.
I believe it is.
So like we have parking. We can park more, like we cannot accommodate as many people in the house that we can park, so that's good. The street is super wide. It's close to I-4, and the turnpike is nearby, and 408 is nearby. So it was when we saw, there was a small house here, and when we saw that, like I drove one by, and I from on Hamilton Lane, and I said, oh, that's pretty cool, there's a little house for sale. Then I turn on, I see Summerlin. It's like, hey, that's the same house. So there's a street on each side.
Yeah.
Perfect. We don't have backdoor neighbors. Like we can only have neighbors on the two sides, and the house right there wasn't there back then. And I said, well, that's fantastic. Let's do this. So we remortgaged the house. Our house was months from being paid off in Hunters Creek. We mortgaged it to the tilt, and then we bought this place, and then we built this, and it's been working out pretty good.
So I believe in the Timucua Arts Foundation website, right?
Yeah.
There's a small video entitled, and again, I don't want to discredit French with what comes out of my mouth, so please excuse me. But it's called Opertoire, a small video that's basically showing the story of
the White House Overture.
Overture.
Yeah. That's a documentary that Steve Radley did, like I guess 2014, 2015. He's a film editor by trade.
Right.
And he said he started getting interested in actually like shooting himself and things, and he said he came to a concert because he lived just down the street, and he said, oh my God, I've got that. That's it. I have my story that I want to do. So so he did a 40-minute documentary, and so we put like a minute condensed version on the website. But
it just was very impressive to me how people that are of the field describe the space. So as a designer, I want you to maybe allude to, this is I forget all of the different wordings that came out, but intimate, unique.
Yeah, well, obviously we
sort of unique to itself, that they've traveled all over the country and they haven't quite experienced something like this.
Yeah, this is the fact that it's the main venue is in our living room, that's cool. And then you enter, the lobby is our dining room, so that's cool. But the building of it, like the acoustics,
exactly,
the
like field,
how quiet it is, like. So my main goal here was to create a place for chamber music or chamber arts. I call it chamber art. So chamber music, people think of a string quartet. Yes, brass quintet also is chamber music, but a jazz quintet is also chamber music, and like violin and piano, that's chamber music, obviously. But a folk trio, to me, that's chamber music too. And like we've had musicians from Venezuela, play like basically like music from their village with the homemade instruments, like that kind of thing. And that's also chamber music to me. Anything that can be played in an intimate space, and that should be placed in an intimate space, and maybe gains from being performed and witnessed and experienced in an intimate place, is chamber music. And then theater, small scale theater, opera, whatever, like film, like independent film, to me is also a chamber art. Like it's not served best by being shown in a huge theater with 50 people in it, because independent film is not going to be attended like by the masses, as are any of the stuff that we do. Like we do everything except things that are accessible and loved by masses. That's not what we do. Like pop music, no.
Right.
And I've had people like beg me to play here, like pop stars, basically. Not A-list stars, but maybe B, C-list stars, but still. I mean, I said, no, you can play anywhere. Like the jazz quartet who wants to perform in a place that is not in support of the food and beverage industry or the tourism industry, they have no place to play. So they come here, and that's why we exist. And so a lot of very quickly when we started these concerts at the other house, I realized that people needed a place to perform for the performers and to witness and experience for the audience, a place that is not a huge place and a place that is not in support, not a bar or a venue where their main means of making money is selling alcohol, because then the vibe is different. Like you cannot duplicate the vibe that we get here easily, because here there is wine, but people bring their own wine. It's like we're not trying to sell them anything. Like we're not trying to do that. Like the only things that are for sale is art and the merch of the group that's here, like their CDs and things that they put out, the art that they put out, and then of course the art, because we always have an artist every month. Right now it's the walls are bare, but it's very rare that that's the case. It's COVID time, but and the whole thing, and one of the main reasons why people like performers who have played all over the world and all kinds of places, and I'm one of them. Like I've played in Europe and things. I've played like in a castle and in a grotto in Italy, like really weird places which stick in my mind, as you can tell. Well, this is one of these places that stick in their mind of the people who come here, because the equilibrium between the audience and the performer is redefined when you come here. It's not a bar where the people on stage have no power and they feel like they're not being listened to. Like basically the barman or the barmaids rule
it's
the
almost
place.
like surround music, but not really.
Yeah, it's like wallpaper.
Yeah.
And then of course the other end of the spectrum is the concert hall, where you go and you're scared of unwrapping your lozenge, because of making any noise, and all the power is on stage and you're supposed to sit there and just listen. And so we wanted something where it feels casual, and the attention and the intense attention that is not allowed, but that is afforded the performers, is earned, and vice versa. So like in return, they get a great performance. And so it's it's more synergistic, it's more natural, it's more the way that it should be. Like it's chamber music comes from musique de chambre, and chambre means room, chambre à coucher is a bedroom, but chambre means like a salon, like what you would think as a living room. Like that was it. Like in from in Europe, from the 12th century on, that, or even before actually, that's what it was. And so we try to restore that, because we've lost, as a society, we've lost to a great extent, we've lost that. And that place where you would invite friends and family and and that's what this is. Like people, of course there are strangers who come, and people think that's weird a little bit. Like that's weird to me now because we've been doing it for 20 years and it's just second nature, and nothing has ever happened. Like nobody's ever come here and stolen anything or anything like that. Like, you know, in fact, there's an added respect for the place because people come here and they figure, hey, I'm in somebody's home. I'm going to try to be careful, like, you know. And so if a glass gets spilled, like, it doesn't just get like forgotten. Like they come and see us, say, hey, can I get the, you know, and then we'll help them and we'll clean it up, you know. And so it's a beautiful thing. And the of course the space, you know, somebody had to think of it and somebody had to like kind of put the impetus on the, you know, the soundproofing as good as possible and the quietness of the room as much as possible, which I apologize for people listening right now. The AC motor on my second floor is making too much noise. I'm getting it fixed this week. But, you know, it's a very quiet room. And so, but more than that, the space is special because of the intent of everyone who's involved. And that means the audience, the performers, but the Timucua team, like, you know, Chris Bell, the executive director, Benji, like all of our team, like everybody wants to improve. So, you know, when lockdown in March happened, the first thing I did is I started working on lighting. So I improved my lighting. So now I have a little lighting board in my office so I can control. But before it was all switches, so it was on or off. Now I have dimmer capability and a lot of things. It improves things. Like the lighting is pretty good. It's better than it was before. And the same thing goes with the sound and like with like in the piano. Like I'm getting new hammers this week. I'm gonna install new hammers in the piano. Like, you know, the piano is a great metaphor, a great example of the spirit of the place, because so I bought the piano for my wife. So that's my wife's piano. About 21 years ago, or 22 years ago, and it's a handmade. You know, it's a 56-year-old handmade piano by KKY. But the more important than that, it's the length the length that will go through or to maintain it. So like nobody changes the strings, the hammers, regulates the action as often as we do. Like nobody. There's not a performing arts center anywhere in the country who maintains their piano as rigorously. I was going to say stupidly. Like it's like really in like OCD. Like it's like, but people come here and they're sponsored by a different brand and they hesitate. They don't want to come. They don't want to play. They play the pianos. And then at the end of the concert, invariably, like from Japan, from Europe, pianists tell me like, this is such a joy to play that piano. And it fills me with pride. And that's why I did it. That's why I do it, man. Thank you very much, because that's why I do it. I want to impress you with how that piano plays. And in return, what I get is a better performance. I get people who play better here than they play elsewhere in town, even local players, because the piano is just more even. It's easier to play. It's easier to make music with because, you know, it's easier to be musical with it when it's even and it's easy to play, you know. So, and that's just like the backline or the double bass. Like we have a backline, you know, venues have a piano sometimes, of course, it happens. Not all venues have a good piano, but a lot of venues have pianos. But no venue has a double bass amps, a guitar, 2-3 guitars actually, like, you know, all of that stuff, like the sound system. I have basically 3 different sound systems to adapt to different, like electronic music. Okay, maybe I'm gonna have this other one with subs in if I need that, that kind of thing. So nobody does that, and the reason that the whole team thinks like that, like it's not just me, like it's like everyone thinks like that. The seating, you know, like, you know, it was loose chairs, and you know, when we got our conditional use permit by the city, because that's a whole story. I'm not gonna go there; it's too long. But the fire marshal came, and she saw the loose chairs, and she said, you know, everything is cool. You're good. Your fire extinguishers, like, you know, you're all code. Everything's good. But I would really address that because in case emergency, you know, we had like these benches that we use as tables for people to put their food and wine on. But in case of emergency, people will knock them around, and it's gonna impede people's movements, and people are gonna get hurt. I said, oh, I never thought of that. Like that never occurred to me, So I built these seats because they're safer and they happen to be more comfortable, and also it's easier for me to wash the floor and things like that. Like it's just more practical for me also. But in addition to that, like there's better sight lines because every row is a little bit taller. And so all of that added up. Like it was a project that I did last year. It took about a month. And, like I could have bought seats, but I was shopping around, like you have a few different avenues, right? For our purposes, because we wanted something, everybody has something to put their food on in front of them. Because I designed these this way, but that's not automatic in normal theater seating. Like either like you get the cinema kind of seats, which have like maybe a cup holder or whatever.
Holder on the side.
Those like to furnish the whole house like this with these seats would have cost about $250,000. So it's a lot of money. Now the other avenue was like church pew makers, and so, but then you have to have some customization and things that would have cost $30,000-$40,000. Our project cost $3,000 because I did it myself, with my son. So it's no brainer to me. It's better adapted. Like there are sections. I have 3 screws holding the whole row together. Zip, zip, zip. 10 seconds. Boom. So like if somebody wants a dance floor, which has happened before, I rearrange the seating as needed, and it don't weigh a ton. And like those theater seats, like those cinema seats, they have to be bolted to the floor. Well, my floor, I love my floor, Brazilian granite, like basically donated to me, like installed, it cost like less than a tenth of what the actual tile is worth. Like, because my Brazilian friend is a tile layer, and he had a leftover from a hotel lobby job that they were going to just throw out. And so, and he installed it it cost me like $225 a square foot installed. Like it's crazy. I don't want to drill holes all over it, and because it's also very beautiful, And so, anyways, everything about the house is like that, and that's how we do things,
Tell us a little bit about, you've mentioned your wife and family a number of times, I've noticed. Tell us about their experiences with Timokoa, their role with Timokoa,
well, the kids,
which I'm sure has been pivotal or a big part.
They have. It's funny because they were interviewed in the and that was 5-6 years ago, whatever, 6 years ago, but it was nice to hear from them that it's shaped their lives to a certain extent. Like they used to open every concert. So every concert, the kids, like if it was classical music, they would play something classical. If it was jazz, they'd play something jazz. So we would play as a family. If it was a piano recital, like each one maybe, or maybe just one of them would play a classical piano piece, that kind of thing. So, and Indian music, salsa, free jazz, like whatever. And, when we started that, the oldest would have been maybe 6, then 4.5 was the middle one, and the little one was 3, maybe 3 years old. And we have pictures, like she's tiny, like, and we would sing also, like if it was vocal music, we'd sing as a family. And so, I would teach them a song every week because we had a concert every week. And so, and my time with them was limited because I worked evenings, afternoon, evening. So I saw them in the morning. I had lunch with them, and I would play a game of chess with them, like at lunch every day. And then, like Saturday morning, I could do something with them if they didn't have soccer. And then Sunday morning, and then Monday night, because we ended up having Monday night off, Sunday, Monday off. And so I had like, little
gaps,
blocks of time with them. And at the same time, we applied the same philosophy that worked for me to them, or for them. So the idea was not to push them to be a virtuoso on anything, but they all play several instruments. They all sing. They all can read music very well. They all are better musicians than I am. And like Camille, my daughter, she's finishing her veterinary doctorate and a master's in epidemiology. And she really doesn't play anymore much, She still has her instruments, but still, she's accomplished a lot. And of course, what people don't realize is that music is a very it requires discipline, and it requires a long view of things. And so my wife teaches piano. That's what she does for a living, and that's what she's done for many, many years. And I think she says it best. Like, music is oftentimes the first time that a child encounters something that requires a long-term commitment and a long-term effort to achieve it. Like, it's just like, in order to see even the first piece, the first tune that they play on the piano, they have to go through steps, and they have to go through like a few weeks of things. And like, no other activity, like soccer, you put a ball in front of them, they'll kick it, and they're off they go. Like, it's not, I mean, you can, in order to get the professional level, of course you have to put in the work like everything else. But like, music, oftentimes in people's lives, is the first time they have something that's it takes such a long time to get any reward out of it, like for the work that you put in. And that's a big part of the benefit that you get from it. Like, that's the teaching right there. That's what you can apply to the rest of your life. Even if you'll never make a musician, even if you stop after 5 years, like, whatever. Like, that's something that stays with you forever.
It's translatable to other parts of your life.
Everything. And so, when we built the house, like this room here, the wood, we did all the wood throughout the house ourselves. We did all the paint ourselves. Not me, more my wife and my kids. I don't like painting that much. I did the primer and then did the color. But the wood, like, I was on a scissor lift because it's very high here, of course. Mm-hmm. And so I was on a scissor lift. So instead of me going down, cutting the piece of wood, I would just, yell the measurements to my son, who was 12 at the time. And he had the miter saw, and he would measure and cut it and then give it to my wife, and my wife would give it to me. And that's how we worked. And everyone was involved. Like, all of them participated in the painting. No one was exempt from that. Like, and so it goes. And so I think it was a good experience for them. You have to ask them to be sure. But I think I would have. That's the kind of childhood I would give. Like, I would be happy to have too. Like, my childhood was actually very different than theirs in a way. But they grew up in a foreign country. Like, they had to learn a new language, all that stuff. But like, Jean-Marie was 9 months when we moved here, so it wasn't a huge sacrifice for him. Like, he didn't speak French at the time. Basically, he didn't speak at all. So he learned both at the same time. But that's it's the same for languages. Like, we asked them to. They were not allowed. They're still not allowed to speak English amongst themselves or to us. So they have to speak French, and they have to learn another language aside from music. So my two boys learned German, and my daughter learned sign language, ESL. And so that, to me, was normal as a parent to ask my kids that they should learn another language. And of course, they get by in Spanish and. Anyways, just because it's not that far from French, I can read Spanish. I can, writing it is a different story. And speaking, I speak a little bit, but I understand. So if you talk amongst each other, like in the Cubans, if they talk amongst each other, I'll lose bits of the conversation just because the accent is pretty unique, and
the dialect
is pretty
so different. Right?
Yeah, and they speak fast and everything, but. If you're speaking to me, right. Like, I've worked with Cubans and I could understand them quite easily, So, I figured children if you ask more of them, they'll just produce more. So, like, if you don't expect anything from them, they won't do anything. But if you expect more from them, they'll do better than you thought. Like, they'll surprise you. And so that I figured I'd rather be surprised than disappointed, So,
and did your sons pursue music?
My youngest one is a cellist and a singer, and so he's studying voice and cello. My oldest son still plays once in a while. Now, the amazing thing is that none of my kids practice music much. Even my son, who's studying in music, like right now he's working, like he's off. He had a gig yesterday singing, so he's gonna come back. He won't touch his cello maybe for a week. Like, but he picks it up because he started young enough and he's been doing. He picks it up and he sounds the same as he did 2 weeks ago. Like it doesn't matter. Like my daughter, it was more pronounced because she went to Colorado State on a horn scholarship to play. So she played horn quite a bit while she was there, but studying animal sciences. But so she wouldn't touch her viola. She didn't have time, right? Well, every year she had a job on viola here at Christmas time, so she'd bring her viola, leave her horn there because you can't bring two instruments on the plane. Anyways, so she'd be here for a month. So she would take out her viola the day before the job. She would set it up and sound as good as she did the year before. Like she hadn't touched her viola for a year, and she sounded nice anyways. Like it took her 5 minutes and then she was good, And then she'd go back to school, auditions, first day of school, there's auditions for the placement, and she'd win everything. She won a horn audition for a professional orchestra down there that she didn't end up taking the position because she had no time. She just wanted to know. The day she came back, like after a month, I would sound like crap, because I started at, basically 16.
Later in life.
Yeah, but they started, Camille started violin and piano at 2 years old. Charles-Edouard started piano at 6 months and violin at 3.5, so a little bit later, and bass at 8, which is still young enough to, especially once, you have the bases covered, you can, the bases covered, you could, improve fast. And so, they're just good musicians, and whether they pursue it or not, was never important to me. Like, I don't care. It's going to be part of their life. If only how much more taste they have with the music they listen to, And it's like, they're not like the brainwashed masses that only listen to what's on the radio. Like they have taste. Right. They have their own taste. Like not necessarily the same as mine, but they have their own taste. Like they know what they like. They like, and they differ. All three like different stuff, And Camille, like she could sing country like nobody's business, and that's not because I love country. It's she likes it and she sings it as very well too, and R&B, that kind of stuff. Like she likes all kinds of music, and so do all my kids. So there's one.
Hi, how are you?
So yeah. Any questions? Any more questions?
So I want to go back to the design process.
Yeah.
One of the things that, and we've alluded to it previously, but you hold a patent as far as I understand it.
Yeah.
Brass valve.
Yeah, a brass valve. Yeah, I have the first prototype right there.
You've also, from what I understand, developed your own. You're multi-instrumentalist, but have predominantly focused on the trumpet, as far as I understand it, for right? So you have a sort of a unique concept, and maybe you can expound on that a little bit. I think you labeled it the open wrap trumpet.
Yeah, open wrap. Yeah. I'm not defending my patent anymore because I got a better idea now. I found a better one. But basically,
tell us a little bit about that sort of side of you, the process. It's pretty unique, I think.
Well, I've always, so my hobby as a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old was designing airplanes, and so I would draw them up, and then I would build a maquette, a 3D like wood made of cedar and stuff like. And my mom still has they probably have our brother's place, but she still has a few of the models. Like they would be about this big, And so that was right off the bat. That's what I like to do. Designing is a part of what I like to do. And what happened with the job that I had was conducting the same show twice a day, 5 days a week. Even though it was very different because of the staff was like, we only had 4 shows.
This was for
Cirque Soleil.
18 years.
18 years, right?
18 years.
Nouba. Yeah, exactly.
So for a large amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. I did 8,500 times that show. So that's, a fair amount. So I could allow my brain to wander a little bit and to explore things. And especially, I always knew which spots I had, like 20 seconds. I didn't have to be like 100% focused, So I could stay more focused the rest of the time. So I always had a notepad and I would jot things down. And so that's when I came up with the open wrap design. Basically, acoustics is physics, right? And so physics is a passion of mine, and
Now
so
that makes a lot more sense.
yeah, and it's Newtonian physics. It's not like advanced physics. It's just like, fluid dynamics, acoustics. So the brass instruments happen to be instruments based on a standing wave, and so the beginning of basically it's actually at the back of the oral cavity up to the flare. The flare now acts like a virtual wall, right? So that it's a wall out of which only maybe 15% of the sound escapes. And so the rest of the loudest part in the whole instrument is at the throat of the mouthpiece. So that the smallest point, that's where the sound is most concentrated. That's why
At the point of entry.
that's where in the 70s pickups they would drill a hole there and put a pickup there because it's the loudest spot. Like it's not the most beautiful sound, but it's the loudest sound. So because it's a standing wave, people think of brass instrument as being driven by wind, and it's not the case. And so the player is driven by wind. Like my lips have that wind drives the vibration that creates the sound. But after that, once it enters the horn, wind as an air movement has nothing to do with it. It's the sound wave movement that has to do with it. And yet there's a lot of square-ish bends in trumpet design that I thought were superfluous and hindering the intonation of because of course the trumpet, for example, is a fairly rich sounding instrument as opposed to, let's say, the flute, which is a pretty pure sounding instrument. So if you if you put a flute sound on a oscilloscope, you get pretty much a pure sine wave. It's very, very close to a pure sine wave, which is just like, and when you have an oscillator that produces a sine wave, it's a close sound to the flute. Like it's like, oh, woo, like that kind of very kind of pure sound without a lot of harmonics in it. The trumpet is the other way around. It's a very, very busy wave. It's like full of harmonics. And we play on the harmonic series, like our actual notes. I can play all kinds of notes. Ba, 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 da, da. The whole harmonic series I play on. That's why with only 3 valves or with only 7 positions on a trombone, you can play all of the notes. And so because we have 7 positions as well, just like the trombone is the same combination of valves, So I thought that there were better ways to design a trumpet, and I found a better way, and I patented it. Now, in order to get there, like the valves were big and heavy and clunky. It wasn't a perfect system, which is why I have a better idea now. So I'm not going to talk about that.
No, we're not going to give that away yet.
Can't give it away. But it's based on the rotary valve, but it's just a better designed rotary valve and a better. It's like existing technology, but executed and designed. The whole design of the instrument is just different, and so that's how it's the same thing. Like, so I didn't invent the house. It
removes a lot of the inefficiencies that were underlying, so to speak.
Well, if you think of like the standing wave, right? If people know what the sound wave kind of looks like a little bit, if you drop a pebble in a pond or a little surface of still water, you're going to see in kind of 2-dimension what the sound wave looks like a little bit. Of course, it's in 3 dimensions, so imagine that keeps doing that this way as well. But that gives you an idea. Now, because it's a standing wave, it goes back and forth. And so how many times, I don't know, but how many times it goes back and forth before it escapes the horn? Like, at least twice, because that's the whole principle of it. It goes back and forth, and then some of it escapes the instrument through the shape of the flare. Like if you have a straight, it's just a very odd sounding instrument if you have a straight. And the trumpet, the B-flat trumpet I play, is a slightly bigger flare by design because it gives me a sound that I enjoy more, Anyways, so a square bend, like different parts of the wave hit different parts of the bend, and so no longer are lined up, and then so they don't hit the next bend at the same time, and there's 17 of those, well 21 if you count, like depending what valve position. There's a lot of these bends in a trumpet, and so if you add those up and you multiply them by the number of times it goes back and forth, you end up with a sound that is altered, That's no longer the same as if it would be if it was a straight pipe, And so that's the basis for that design, And I'm not reinventing anything. I'm just like applying, and just to give you an idea, I can show you my trumpet. I'll show you my trumpet. It's just like it incorporates. I did not make that trumpet. I just had it custom made for me. But one of just one of the bends is wider than normal. Normally it would be like this right here. Whoops. Let me see if I don't know. Let me show it here. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe even better on this one. But all of these bends are a certain radius. They're all the same radius because manufacturing makes it easier for manufacturing, because then they can make thousands of these bends, and then But this one here is actually they have the round tuning square, the tuning slide, and the squarish kind of tuning slide. This is the squarish tuning slide that they cut and they use because it's a wider radius, right? So it's a smoother bend. Just that changed the sound like a lot. And I had two of those made. The other one was supposed to be the bright one for recording. This was the dark one, or the acoustic one, because I played at the parade unamplified at the beginning of the show, right? And so I had to play loud, but it had to sound mezzo forte. Like I had to play forte, but it had to sound comfortable. And I was playing for 1,500 people without a microphone. And everyone else in the band was amplified, right? So I had to play louder than comfortable.
That was the opening to La
That
Nouba.
was the opening to La Nouba. And that's why this horn was built and designed. Like that's why I had it made. Just for the parade. It was like 3.5 minutes, and then I would hang it up and not use it for the rest of the show. And so because I needed a different thing out of it than I needed for my other one. But the other one with the same bend, it was exactly the same horn, but a different bell, different it was supposed to be bright. It wasn't bright. It wasn't bright enough. I had to work too hard. So I sold it. It worked great for other stuff, but that's not what I needed. I needed a really bright horn for the microphone. When you have a microphone this far from the bell, you need a bright sound because it picks it up better and it's easier to play, and I don't force so much and I can get the sound I want. Now, this is exactly the other way around. So I want to be able to play loud, but not sound like I'm playing loud. Usually it's the other way around. I don't want to work my butt off, and I want to put a certain amount of effort and get the impression from the audience that I'm putting a lot more effort. Like it's,
right.
It's more exciting. It's like, it's just better. It's just nicer, for the audience to hear.
So that's a good segue to my next sort of point on your bio, which fortunately you give us a little snippet, mind you, it's a brief one, but yeah. I'm sure there's a lot to tell. But you mentioned sound amplification. I found that now I understand now through the process of the interview why you have those underlying interests to begin with. But I can't imagine I would think it's atypical, right, for a conductor to be, like, for example, with Timokoa, you're the sound engineer.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah.
There's a conference that you did in Banff, Canada. How to
the audio for the modern trumpeter. So it's the ITGs.
Audio, the entitled seminar series.
Yeah, I think it was
how you can hear yourself.
Yeah, I can hear yourself, because
in an increasingly amplified world.
Exactly. So the ITG, the International Trumpet Guild, every year they have a conference, and 2008 was in Banff, and so the host of the conference was Jens Lindemann, world famous trumpet soloist, and he was going to McGill when I was teaching there. He was doing his and then he went to Juilliard after. But so we've known each other for a long time. So he invited me to play. So I played but he wanted me to do a lecture on that, because he's asked over the years. He's asked my advice many times. Like he calls me sometimes at 1 a.m. because he's in Singapore or something. Like he forgets, and he calls me and says, "Hey man, I need this, blah blah." So because of all the time I spent, I'm a studio musician, right? So because of all the time I spent in the studios in Montreal, I became adept at those kinds of things. And so I became interested. Also, McGill happened to be the best masters in audio engineering in North America. It's modeled after the European model. It's a very, very good program, which I don't have a master's in audio engineering, but I audited a lot of the classes. Like I read all the material. Like I was just interested in that. And experience taught me over the years that, if I have my own gear and don't depend on a sound engineer in a live situation, I have a better chance of hearing myself. And I ended up, using like these little earbuds. And I actually had molded earbuds, like like the inventor, the first person to like Dr. Forget, he did for Céline Dion's monitor engineer, and then that's number one. Number two is Céline Dion, and I'm number three, serial number three on those. Like I've had those since like the 80s. So I was always interested in trying to see how I could hear myself better whilst lowering the overall volume so I could keep my hearing for my whole life. Because you play in a salsa band, it's loud.
Yeah.
It's very loud because that's what I did a lot of that, like Latin music and Latin discotheques, which I loved. I loved the music and I learned a lot about percussion and all that stuff. And because Montreal is such a culturally diverse city, but also it's all patches. Like it's like sectors. Like there's the Colombian neighborhood, there's the Peruvian neighborhood. So I've played the same songs with like a Chilean band, a Dominican band, a Cuban band, and they play it different way. Like they all have different flavors to like. And I've learned all of that through the years because I was lucky enough to play in these kinds of bands for years and years. But that's like. And I played in rock bands, I played in pop situations, all kinds of things, and television shows like talk shows too. And it's the same thing. Like if you end up with a wedge there, and then so you depend on the engineer, and then usually because you're playing a trumpet, they just have this kind of nightmarish vision of a trumpet bell coming out of their speaker, and they always think that we can hear ourselves, but the bell is pointing that way, and if there's not a wall right in front of me, I can't hear myself. I just need some kind of feedback in order not to force and to sound good. And that's very hard for people to understand for some reason. Like, if they don't play the instrument, they don't know. And so the drummer had monitors with the bass and the drums and everything else they need. And we had a monitor, and it was so hard to try and get trumpet in there because you hear yourself, man, come on, I can hear you from here. Yes, you can, you're in front of my bell, but I'm not. Right. I'm behind my bell. So, and in essence, I designed, over the years, I ended up with my ideal system. So you need a little bit of reverberation because the reverb, because the mic is so close to the bell. If it's dry, it's just hard. It doesn't feel natural. And so you need that. You need a certain amount of compression, all that stuff. So I ended up building these kits, and there were 2-channel kits. And so I could do, like, for example, the mute on one side and the open horn on the other. So because oftentimes I had 2 different horns for those because I didn't have time to switch. That's what I did at La Nouba too. I had an open horn and a muted horn. And the intonation, every time, like, you change mouthpiece, change the tuning of the horn, like, it takes a long time to switch. So it's just easier to have 2 different instruments. And but it can also be used like so I've done gigs, for example, where 6 horns, like an R&B kind of band, Tower of Power-ish kind of band, and then you have 6 horns and the 2 trumpets were paired, and then we had wedges to hear the other horns and the rest of the band, but we could hear ourselves right there, and it was like bliss. And so, and I saved my chops a lot doing that, and I could play longer, I could play more jobs, and for a longer period of time. Like, you get trumpet players who have like these huge racetrack, we call them racetracks, like huge, like, damage to their lips, because they're forcing too much.
So they're essentially just overcompensating because they
can't hear themselves. They're playing too loud, and then they can't. And there are like passive systems, like these little bits of plexi you put around your microphone, that kind of stuff. But it just makes things louder. And to me, saving your hearing is a very important part of life, and we should all strive to keep our hearing as long as we can, because it's going to go down. It's not going to get better. Nobody's hearing gets better.
Right.
Like, that's not how life works. And so that's the lecture I gave at ITG, and I tell you, it was a little bit unnerving because all of my idols were all there because they were all interested in the topic because they all lived through it. Like, they all, most of them, except the ones who strictly do like orchestral, that kind of thing, where nothing is amplified. But a lot of, like, I had Al Vizzuti, Vince DiMartino, like Tiger Okoshi, like, all in the first row. It was all like A-list players, and then the place was full. And I had some examples to give. Like, I wanted I was playing as part of my lecture, right? And so I had pre-recorded a lot because I was here at the time, and I so different mics, different preamps. I wanted to, let them know what my sound sounds like, and then hear all the examples so that they can tell the difference and how it affects, so I use the same mouthpiece, same trumpet as I use for the recordings, and I use as scientific a method as I could as far as pretty stringent test conditions so that it was pretty accurate. So that they could make choices. So if you have $10,000, that was my favorite one. Yeah, but it's going to cost you $20,000 or $10,000 or $3,000, whatever. And so I had this all structure so that, something for every budget and something for everyone who works in that field. And so, I'm happy to see that, I see guys on television, for example, horn players, brass players, and saxophone players who are starting to kind of have their own thing. And I see that it's gone a little bit, if not viral, it's gone public, it's being used, and that's, to me, it's important because they save their hearing as well as their jobs, and they sound better. You could just play better when you're not straining.
So as we sort of come full circle, right, to our sit down together today, I'm going to ask you probably a two-part question because I do want to allow for some time so that we can experience the Glazer family in one of your own compositions.
Yes.
Which again, I don't want to mangle, and the name of the composition is
Petite pièce québécoise.
See, there
Petite
you go.
pièce québécoise. So in 2015, the Orlando Philharmonic, they have a summer series, and one of the concerts was Music of the Americas. It was music for strings, and they didn't have anything from Canada. And so they asked me, can you write something from Canada? And so I said, oh yeah, I can. So, but if you don't mind, I'll write something for trumpet. So I can, it's more fun for me. I can play it, And so, so that's what I did. It's a 3-movement piece, and based on 3 childhood memories. So the first movement is based on cross-country skiing. So, I would cross the street. Literally, it was not a street, it was like a rural road, unpaved at the time. Now it's paved. To cross the road, and then there, about 20 kilometers, so 13 miles away this way, there was a cross country and an alpine ski center. So there was tracks and places you do. And then on the other side, we had a river right behind our house with a dam on it. So I would just walk over the dam. And then put my skis on, and there was another center about the same distance the other side. So there was one northwest and one northeast, and that's where I would train. I was a competitive cross-country skier, and so so that first movement might remind people of Prokofiev. It's fast, but you can kind of tell that the climate is colder, and it's fast but repetitive. Because that's what cross country is. It's the same movements over and over, but in my case, it was a pretty tight forest trail to get to that place, and so it was very relieved, a lot of undulation and things, and basically I could feel the trees go by, and the partridge, lots of game, hare and partridge. And the partridge is kind of like the pigeon family, flight-wise. They make a lot of noise. That's how they scare or they confuse their predators. They're the opposite of an owl's flight. The owl is very quiet flyer, silent, but there's click, click, click. So the tempo, the tempo, the main rhythmic is it's the same as when a partridge takes off. So it's all based on that childhood memory of mine. Okay, so, and then if you listen carefully, at one point on the way back, there was a long, slow incline that I would climb, and I would have to climb. And at the top of that climb, I could see it was so, I could see Montreal, and I could see the Oratoire Saint-Joseph, it's not a cathedral, but a monastery kind of thing. A pilgrimage center, it's a round dome, you could see that from there. It's an hour and 20 minutes away. It's a long ways, but you could see that from there. And I could take a breath and so you'll hear all of that. And then after that, it picks up because it was pretty much downhill until I got home. So that's the first movement. The second movement is called La Vallée. And that's because My wife flies planes, like she has a flight. She doesn't anymore, but she has her license. And I don't have my license, but I've flown also as a youngster, and I flew gliders. So I've flown gliders before, and the one time, like usually it was like a cable pull, so like it's not a long, like it's a, you know, however long you can make it, but it's not very high. But I got pulled by a plane once, like, and then so I could fly. It was a much longer trip, and I was over the St. Lawrence Valley, and it's like such a beautiful, you know, it's kind of like a flat. There's mountains on one side, and then there's these individual mountains, like bulbous kind of hills on the other side, south of Montreal. And then when you go east, eventually the fjord of the Saguenay, there's the only fjord in North America, kind of empties itself in the St. Lawrence River when it starts getting wider. And and then there's farming villages, it's farmland. Like, you know, the whole valley is like very fertile, very rich soil. And so they're villages. So they're farming villages. They were called the seigneurie back then. So I guess, I don't know, like the feudal, like it's kind of like a leftover from the feudal system in Europe. And so there was a seigneur, a lord, you know, a landowner, and then the serfs, if you will, or the farmers, you know. And so they're all villages with a huge cathedral in the middle of the village, like from, you know, 10,000 feet, you can see all like pretty far. And that's what it is, like peppered through this like multicolored farmland, and with this majestic, huge river in the middle. It's just beautiful. So that's the second movement. And the third movement is, so my father comes from Gaspésie. So like, you know, Quebec looks a little bit like a face looking east. And the St. Lawrence is the mouth, you know, and the lower lip is Gaspésie. So like, you know, that's the eastern edge. My wife is from the north shore, very far up north, but on the north shore of the St. Lawrence. My father was from the south shore of the St. Lawrence. And very poor family. So they had to use ingenuity to feed themselves. And so they would fish salmon. There's Salmon River that was strictly for American tourists and strictly for fly fishing. They would go and use lures and just like kind of navigate the guards. Like the guards had rounds that they would do. So they just like stay away from the guards anyway. So I witnessed one of these events. Like, so they went fishing, and like basically they were walking behind the guard, like a mile behind the guard, because they knew the schedules and stuff. And took an hour, more than an hour, to get that salmon out of there, because if you pull too hard, it just, you know, and the salmon goes. And it's 72 pound, like huge salmon. And
wow.
So for 3 days after that, there was a feast, and there was music around.
It was very festive. Very happy.
It's like there was music around the fire, and nonstop beer, salmon, and music for 3 days. And so that's what this is called, la fête, which is the feast or the party, you could say. Like,
that's why it is so festive.
Yes.
In nature.
And at the same time, if you listen carefully, you'll hear like colors of the Baroque in there, because just to kind of remind people that the French were in North America while Bach was alive, like a long time ago, you know. Yeah. And so that's why you hear that. And it's a little bit more virtuosic for the trumpet, that one, because, you know, my father was a fiddler, and there's a fiddle tune in there that's very traditional. Most of our folk music comes from either Ireland or Brittany, which is the Celtic part of France, right? And that most of our ancestors are from Brittany. And so, because it was the closest to the sea, so that they were the people basically who came over to North America. But so that's what the piece is. So I hope people enjoy it. It's about 12 and a half minutes long.
It's going to be wonderful.
But it's hopefully, if it's easy to listen to. Like it's new music. It's relatively recent music. But I usually don't write music is very, very dissonant necessarily. It's just my. You know, like in this case, it had a purpose. It's kind of like programmatic music in that sense. There's a very specific idea behind each movement, and hopefully people can enjoy that.
Wonderful. So that is going to come right after this closing question. what is next for Mr. Benoit Glazer and for the Timucua Arts Foundation? And those are disjointed questions. They don't have to be
Yes.
lumped in together.
Well, what is coming next? We're working for a way to donate the house to the foundation. So we're working on that right now. So that we'll gift the house to the foundation. We'll still live here, but the house will belong to the foundation. So that's a big step for us because it's everything we own. So it's a little bit unnerving, but we're gonna make the plunge. We'll do it. And so this way it has several advantages. Like essentially it'll free us financially because the expenses are very very high for the kind of income that we make now. It was easy when I was working at La Nouba, but now it's a little harder. It's okay, but it's let's say we haven't gone on vacation in the past 3 years because we can't afford it. But it also is an advantage for the foundation because it opens up a lot of grants that they can't not get right now because they don't own the venue, and so they cannot ask for venue related grants. So I think it's a win-win situation, and we're going to do that. And after that, I'm going to keep on practicing my trumpet. It's kind of strange because I haven't played with anybody except my family since March.
Right.
So in 8-9 months now. But I'm going to keep practicing my trumpet every day like I do now, and I keep practicing golf every day like I do now. And my wife will keep teaching piano, and the boys will eventually get their degrees and find their ways and find their not necessarily their passion, but life is gonna come to them. Like they're gonna flourish in life. And my daughter is doing that. She's in Scotland still. We're getting our citizenship, so that's new. That's next. Actually, Charles is going to be the first one. His interview is in a couple
Big
of weeks.
step.
It's been a long time coming, but that's what it is. We tried very hard to be citizens in time for voting, but did not work this time. Next year,
Next
we're gonna
cycle.
vote. Well, even this year, local elections and everything, we're going to be happy to vote as soon as we can. But that's about it. I mean, basically, this was my hobby for many years, but now golf is my hobby, and this is my full-time life now. So.
Right.
And then it could change, who knows? I could teach again. Like I love teaching. So I had some students up until COVID. I had some students, like master students and things like that who just want a different point of view, that kind of thing. And that's something maybe I can offer is a different point of view.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Glazer, for your hospitality, for your time. And I guess more generally as a citizen of Orlando for your vocation. This hobby has turned into a 20-year lifelong event that has touched and will continue to touch, I'm sure, many people's lives, not only the people that want to consume the music and the arts in this venue, but also the people that play in it, the people that benefit from having this, as a place to.
And I hope the overall
really.
scene as well,
Right.
like the overall art scene, I like to think that we played a small part in the expansion of that scene, like it's been growing, the growth of that scene, and throughout the world, because for a few years now we've been live streaming, but now of course it's taken a whole new importance, and we continue to broadcastings online at a pretty frantic rate. So two concerts broadcast a week. For now, we might go to one in 2021 because it's a lot of work. But then, of course, with our live events coming back, we're planning. Programming has been very, very difficult right now because, like a lot of touring musicians, you just don't know what to expect still. But and it creates it's going to create a big log jam. Like it's going to just it's it's a logistical nightmare. Honestly. I've been spending an hour or two every day just trying to plan for the future because you have to constantly be in contact with different musicians. Okay, what are your plans? What are you doing? When are you coming to Florida? That kind of thing. And it's hard to we're trying to coordinate with other venues in Florida to try to attract better talent to the state. That kind of thing. That's the growth that we're looking for. And in 20 years, hopefully, Timokoa is going to feel the same when you get in, but you're going to be able to get in many more places. Mm-hmm. And so we want to open new spaces between here and DC on one side, and here and like New Orleans on the other side, so that there can be like a natural tour. That'd be wonderful. Automatic kind of happens automatically, so that we can have so many more great international artists coming our way, because right now it's hard to bring them here just because there's no driving tour. Like, it's hard. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to make it easy for everyone, and that means that people here will benefit because better musicians will come here more often. So,
well, we can't wait to do another interview then when these things come into fruition and these dots are connected, but I'm sure that they will. I wish you continued success.
Thank you, Cesar.
And now we...
and same to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank
you for your support. And, it's just wonderful to meet you and to connect this way.
Excellent. Thanks.
No question. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another segment of Inspire Movement. We've had an amazing time here with Mr. Benoit Glazer at Timucua Arts Foundation. And we're very excited about what's to come for the organization over the next few years. Please connect with them. They're here in downtown Orlando. It's a wonderful organization with over 100 events per year in a beautiful concert hall, as you can see behind me, that seats over 100 people very comfortably in a very intimate space. So with that, we're going to now transition into a beautiful performance by the Glaser family with Mr. Benoit Glazer's composition, which I won't try to mangle the name thereof, but it's going to be wonderful, and I know that you're going to like it. Thank you so much again for tuning in.